We live in a world that is exhausting itself, trying to be noticed. Everywhere you look, people are frantically polishing their resumes, loudly broadcasting their achievements on social media, and hijacking conversations to assert their credentials. They believe that to be respected, trusted, and valued, they must constantly prove their competence. They treat social interactions like a continuous job interview, desperately laying out their titles, their degrees, and their past victories like armor. But when you analyze the deepest mechanisms of human behavior, you realize that this loud, self aggrandizing display achieves the exact opposite of its intended goal. It doesn't build trust, it breeds deep, immediate psychological resistance. When you constantly showcase your credentials, you are not projecting high status. You are projecting a loud, anxious cry for validation. Kinda. Dale Carnegie understood that the human ego is a hypersensitive, highly defensive radar system. The moment someone senses that you are trying to impress them or that you are asserting your superiority through your qualifications, their defenses instantly lock down. Your impressive resume doesn't make them feel safe, it makes them feel small. It triggers their own deep seated insecurities, forcing them to look for flaws in your arguments, discount your achievements, and quietly resist your influence. Carnegie observed that the deepest, most universal craving of the human soul is the desire to be important, to be recognized, and to be valued. When you enter a room and immediately focus the spotlight on your own credentials, you are stealing the exact psychological oxygen they need to survive. True high status authority does not beg for attention, and it never demands respect through a list of past accomplishments. Think about the most influential people you have ever encountered. They are rarely the ones reciting their CVs or dominating the airwaves with their expertise. They are the individuals who possess a quiet, almost magnetic confidence, a presence so grounded that they have absolutely nothing to prove. They understand that trying to force people to trust your judgment through your credentials is a low status transaction. Instead of forcing compliance from the outside, they cultivate a profound, organic form of trust from the within. They do this by shifting their focus entirely away from themselves and onto the human being standing directly in front of them. And to master this level of silent influence, you must undergo a massive internal shift. You must be entirely willing to let your credentials remain in the background, treating your expertise not as a weapon of dominance, but as a quiet, steady foundation. When you stop worrying about whether the room knows how smart, qualified, or experienced you are, you free up an immense amount of cognitive energy. You stop performing and you start observing. You stop talking and you start listening. You realize that the ultimate secret to being perceived as highly dot competent is not to tell people how much you know, but to make them feel deeply understood. Correct. This is where the transition to absolute, unspoken authority begins. It starts when you consciously choose to lay down your armor of achievements. By keeping your credentials tucked away, you disarm the defensive guard of the other person's ego. You make it incredibly safe for them to drop their own guard, creating a psychological vacuum that automatically defaults leadership and trust to you. You don't need to show off your crown, you simply provide the steady, unshakable sanctuary of presence that forces the room to naturally defer to your judgment. You know? When you constantly showcase your credentials, you are not projecting high status, you are projecting a loud, anxious cry for validation. To build deep, unshakable trust without ever displaying your credentials, you must master the art of the Socratic pull. Most people believe that the way to demonstrate expertise is by providing immediate, complex answers. When a problem arises, they rush to speak, eager to showcase their knowledge and prove they have the solution. But when you quickly offer a pre-packaged answer, you aren't actually building trust. You are asserting intellectual dominance. You are telling the other person, I am smarter than you, and I have already solved this. This dynamic immediately triggers psych. Their ego feels sidelined, and they subconsciously look for reasons to doubt, pick apart, or completely reject your perspective. Okay? The master of human engineering, trained in the core of Dale Carnegie's principles, does the exact opposite. Instead of pushing answers onto the other person, they pull the truth out of them. They do this by replacing declarative statements with deep, surgical, and incredibly thoughtful questions. Carnegie constantly emphasized that the best way to win people to your way dot of thinking is to let them feel that the idea is theirs. When you ask a targeted, high-level question, you are not displaying ignorance, you are displaying the highest form of intellectual mastery. You are inviting the other person to become a partner in the problem-solving process. And think about the profound psychological difference between these two approaches in a professional setting. Okay? Imagine a complex project is failing and a team lead needs to guide a struggling manager. And, okay, the credentials approach. I've managed dozens of these rollouts and you are bottlenecking the QA phase. You need to bypass the secondary testing and push to production immediately. This triggers defensiveness. The manager feels criticized and micromanaged, the Socratic pull. With your close view of the daily operations here, what do you see as the single greatest risk to our launch date? And if we were to adjust our QA timeline, how would that affect our security parameters? Mechanics. Notice the surgical precision of the second approach. By asking these questions, you have not displayed your credentials, yet your expertise is incredibly obvious through the sheer depth of your inquiry. When you ask high-level questions, you force the other person's brain to do the cognitive work. As they formulate the answer, they are forced to confront the realities of the situation, ultimately arriving at the exact conclusion you wanted them to reach. But because the realization occurred inside their own mind, they adopt it completely. They do not feel managed or corrected. They feel respected, valued, and brilliant. You have successfully guided their judgment, built an immense amount of trust, and kept your ego entirely out of the way. Okay? By utilizing the Socratic pull, you completely bypass the friction of the ego. You allow the other person to retain their sense of absolute autonomy and importance, which Carnegie identified as the deepest craving of human nature. You show them that you respect their intellect enough to seek their perspective, and in doing so, they naturally begin to crave your approval and defer to your ultimate judgment. You don't need to shout your credentials from the rooftops. Your questions do all the heavy lifting for you, quietly establishing you as the most competent, insightful, and trusted authority in the room. By replacing declarative statements with deep, surgical questions, you let them arrive at the conclusion themselves, preserving their autonomy. Once you have mastered the Socratic pull, you are ready to introduce the next layer of quiet authority: active vulnerability. This is the ultimate weapon against the human instinct of jealousy. When you walk into a room carrying immense competence, people naturally feel a sense of intimidation. If you present yourself as a flawless, all-knowing expert who never makes a mistake, you don't actually build trust. You build a wall of cold separation. The human brain is highly suspicious of perfection because it knows perfection is a lie. When you try to look completely invincible, others will subconsciously search for your cracks, waiting for you to stumble so they can level the playing field of status. Dale Carnegie knew that the quickest way to disarm this natural skepticism is to preemptively lower your own armor. He taught that one of the most powerful things you can do to build instant, deep seated trust is to admit your own mistakes or limitations quickly and emphatically. When you are the first to say, I actually made a huge miscalculation on a similar project last year, or I don't have the full answer to that specific technical question yet, but I want to find out a fascinating psychology. By exposing a small, calculated area of vulnerability, you aren't lowering your status. Instead, you are projecting an incredible level of inner security. Only a person who is entirely confident in their overall competence can afford to dot admit a mistake or a gap in their knowledge without fearing a loss of respect. You are signaling to the room that your ego is completely out of the equation and that you care far more about finding the truth than looking perfect. Okay, this act of active vulnerability creates an immediate, profound sense of psychological safety for everyone around you. In a world where everyone is desperately trying to hide their flaws, your raw honesty acts as a breath of fresh air. People instantly relax their own defenses because they realize they don't have to perform around you. They stop trying to prove how smart they are. They stop looking for your cracks and they start listening to you with absolute sincerity. By showing that you are human, imperfect, and still learning, you make yourself highly relatable and deeply trusted. You don't need a list of credentials to demand respect. Your vulnerability proves that you possess the highest and rarest form of status, the status of a leader who is entirely secure in their own skin and who has nothing to prove to anyone. What exposing a small, calculated vulnerability signals an incredible level of inner security, making you instantly relatable and deeply trusted. Once you have established absolute trust through active vulnerability, you are ready to deploy the final, crowning mechanism of this social architecture, the strategic spotlight. Most people believe that to assert authority, they must keep the spotlight firmly fixed on themselves. They want to be the ones with the final word, the ones receiving the praise, and the ones seen as the absolute center of gravity in the room. But this is an incredibly fragile way to hold status. The moment you hog the spotlight, you invite silent resentment from everyone around you. They feel sidelined, ignored, and undervalued. The master of human engineering, trained in the core of Dale Carnegie's philosophy, operates with a completely different level of sophistication. They realize that the ultimate form of power is not standing in the spotlight, it is controlling the spotlight. Okay? Instead of using your energy to highlight your own brilliance, you use your platform to shine a warm, intense, and highly specific spotlight on the contributions, ideas, and potential of the people around you. You look for the quietest person in the room and pull their insight to the surface. You take a fragmented idea suggested by a colleague and reframe it as a stroke of genius. You publicly praise the dedication of your team, assigning them the credit for a major victory. It, your perceived value in any social system increases in direct proportion to your ability to make the people around you feel incredibly valuable. Again, when you do this, something extraordinary happens to your social standing because you are the source of their validation and importance. People subconsciously anchor their own feelings of self worth to your presence. They don't just respect your judgment, they become fiercely loyal to your leadership. They realize that when you succeed, they succeed. Again, by strategically shifting the focus away from yourself and onto others, you build an ironclad network of support that no list of raw credentials could ever buy. You don't need to tell the room how competent or powerful you are. The intense loyalty, respect, and deep-seated deference of the people you have elevated will scream it on your behalf, establishing you as an untouchable, highly trusted authority who rules entirely from the background. Okay. True power is not standing in the spotlight. It is controlling the spotlight to elevate others, making you their ultimate source of validation. When you reach the peak of this psychological discipline, your entire relationship with authority, influence, and social status undergoes a profound evolution. You no longer enter professional spaces with the defensive urge to prove yourself, and you no longer feel the exhausting need to display your credentials to command respect. Instead, you step into every room carrying a rare, unshakable sanctuary of absolute composure. You realize that true authority is not a crown you demand others to see. It is a quiet, steady gravity that naturally pulls people toward you. Okay? This is the ultimate luminous peak of Dale Carnegie's philosophy. He did not teach us to understand human nature so we could manipulate our way to the top. He taught us that when you choose to lay down your own ego, protect the dignity of others, and focus entirely on making them feel valued, you are exercising the highest form of emotional maturity. In a world where everyone is desperately screaming for attention, your quiet, focused presence becomes a magnetic force. And the power of unspoken authority. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth, you instantly elevate your status. True competence does not need to advertise itself. It is felt in the depth of your questions, the security of your vulnerability, and the warmth of your attention. Okay? By maintaining your poise, utilizing the Socratic pull, admitting your limitations with ease, and keeping the spotlight firmly fixed on elevating those around you, you achieve something magnificent. You bypass the complex, hostile machinery of the human ego entirely. People stop viewing you as a competitor to be feared or an outsider to be doubted. They begin to view you as a trusted confidant, a steady anchor, and a natural leader. You know, as you carry this cinematic blueprint back into the high stakes, fast paced realities of your daily life, remember the quiet rules of the game. Let the loud voices scramble for the titles. Let the insecure minds boast about their resumes. And let the crowd fight for the shallow warmth of temporary applause. While they are busy performing, you will walk through the world with the quiet, stoic, untouchable confidence of a master of human behavior. By letting go of the need to show off your credentials, you gain the ultimate prize, an unshakable, unspoken authority that shapes reality entirely from the shadows, proving forever that the quietest presence is always the one that commands the deepest respect. Okay. By letting go of the need to show off your credentials, you gain the ultimate prize, an unshakable, unspoken authority that shapes reality entirely from the shadow. You know, good.